All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling IHRM, International Human Resource Management.
Huge topic.
It is a huge topic, you're not kidding. We're using Chapter 14 from a business and management course we found.
Oh.
So this is going to be all about that global HR scene.
Right.
Now, whether you are, thinking about working internationally, maybe you're already doing that, or if you just want to understand, how businesses kind of handle this whole global workforce thing, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Absolutely.
I remember one time I was trying to explain, American tipping customs to a friend of mine who was visiting from Europe, and let's just say it led to some
misunderstanding?
Yeah, some confused looks for sure. And a very, very generous tip.
It's a tricky one.
It is.
Yeah, not every culture does.
No, not at all. And it's these kinds of cultural differences that I think make IHRM so fascinating and often challenging.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get into all the really nitty-gritty details, what exactly is IHRM? For someone who's just hearing this for the first time.
Right. Yeah. IHRM is basically how companies manage their people on a global scale.
Okay.
So it's really about understanding the challenges and the opportunities that come with having a diverse workforce, spread all over different countries.
Makes sense.
So think about like different legal systems.
Oh, yeah.
Different cultural norms.
Huge.
Different economic conditions.
Right.
All impacting how you manage your employees.
Yeah, so it's like taking those, core HR functions, hiring, training, compensation, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then just adding on like this whole other layer of global complexity.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing like one of the first big challenges is figuring out, who to hire in the first place. How do companies approach staffing when they're working on this global scale?
So there are kind of three main approaches.
Okay.
You've got ethnocentric, polycentric, and geocentric.
Those are some big words.
They are, yeah.
Break it down for us.
All right, so ethnocentric basically means, keeping those key roles filled by people from the company's home country.
Oh, okay.
So it gives them a sense of control.
Right.
But it can also lead to some cultural clashes, maybe some missed opportunities to really take advantage of the local talent that's available.
Yeah, like imagine you have this tech company that's, expanding into a brand new market.
Right.
And they only send, executives from their headquarters.
Yeah.
They're probably going to miss out on a lot of really valuable insights.
For sure.
From local hires who just understand that market way better.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also sounds like it could, breed some resentment.
Oh, yeah.
Among the employees who are already there.
Absolutely.
So what about that second approach, polycentric?
Yeah, so polycentric is kind of the opposite, with hiring locals to manage in their own countries. So good example of that would be like a global retailer that's trying to, adapt their marketing to each region.
Right.
It offers more cultural sensitivity. But you could also run into inconsistencies across the entire company.
Yeah, think about like a big global brand, trying to keep like a unified image.
Yeah.
A purely polycentric approach. It might be really hard to like enforce those brand standards across the board.
Yeah, you can end up with like totally different experiences depending on where you are in the world.
Right. So it's like this trade-off between, local expertise and global consistency.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what about that third option, geocentric?
Yeah, so geocentric is all about finding the best person for the job.
Okay.
Regardless of where they come from.
Okay.
Their nationality doesn't really matter.
Got it.
So think about like a global manufacturer that needs, the top engineering talent.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter where those engineers are located as long as they're the best, Yeah.
Expertise over everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, that can definitely lead to a really, really strong team.
Yeah.
But I bet it's also probably the most complex and expensive way to manage things.
It definitely can be.
Yeah, think about relocation costs, visas, all that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of logistics involved.
For sure. For sure.
Definitely.
Speaking of juggling a lot of things, let's talk about expats.
Okay.
It sounds kind of glamorous on the surface, but I've heard it can be incredibly challenging.
No, absolutely.
Like way more than people realize.
Yeah. Did you know that up to 70% of expats actually fail in developing countries?
70%, that's a huge number.
It is a startling statistic.
What contributes to like that high failure rate?
I mean, it's got to be more than just like missing home-cooked meals, right?
I would think so, yeah.
Cultural adjustment is a major factor.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, imagine, trying to navigate like a business meeting,
right,
where the communication style is just totally different from what you're used to.
Yeah. And then you have things like, family pressures.
Yeah.
Uprooting a whole family can be really, really tough.
Yeah, it's especially if the spouse or the kids,
Mm-hmm.
they're struggling to adapt
Yeah.
to this new environment.
Right. And then there's the impact on your career too.
Right.
Like if you come home after a few years abroad,
Yeah.
it could almost feel like starting over in some cases.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that you mentioned, career impact, because it sounds like expat assignments, they're not just a temporary relocation.
No.
It's a much bigger commitment than that.
It is.
So what can companies do, to really increase the chances of success for their expats?
Well, the research suggests that there are 4 key dimensions that kind of predict expat success.
Okay.
So you have self-orientation,
All right.
others orientation,
All right.
perceptual ability,
Gotcha.
and cultural toughness.
Okay, break those down for us a little bit.
Sure. So self-orientation is really about having a strong sense of self, being confident and resilient. Then you've got others orientation. And that's really about, being able to connect with people from different cultures, being empathetic, being understanding. Perceptual abilities, kind of like being able to read between the lines,
Okay.
pick up on those subtle cues and nuances
Right.
of a different culture.
Gotcha.
And then cultural toughness
Yeah.
is, how well you can adjust to new surroundings, new ways of doing things.
Right, because some people really thrive in those unfamiliar environments, and others, they struggle a lot more.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more than just personality traits, though, right? It's like having this global mindset.
Yeah, it's a way of thinking.
Is that something you're born with, or can you develop that?
It's a bit of both, I
Right.
think.
Right.
Some people are just naturally more adaptable, more open to new experiences. But I definitely think you can cultivate a global mindset
Okay.
through experience, through training.
So it's not just as simple as handing someone a phrase book and a guide to local customs.
Right. No, it's much more than that.
What does effective training for expats actually look like?
It goes way beyond, the language lessons and etiquette.
Right.
It should cover things like, local customs, business practices, even just the practicalities of daily life in that new country.
Oh, yeah.
So things like, cultural simulations,
Oh, wow.
maybe mentoring from former expats,
That's great.
even just like advice on how to find a good grocery store, how to navigate public transportation.
Yeah. It's all about making that expat feel comfortable
Exactly.
in both their work life and their personal life.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, the personal side of things. It really sounds like companies are taking a much more holistic approach now
They are. Yeah.
to supporting expats. But what happens when it's time to come home?
Mm-hmm.
That transition back, I imagine, can be kind of tricky, right?
It can be, yeah, we call it repatriation.
Okay.
And it's often overlooked.
Oh, interesting.
Expats can face reverse culture shock,
Wow.
difficulty finding a job that utilizes their new skills,
Right.
even just a sense of not really belonging anymore.
Yeah, like you've changed, but maybe your home environment hasn't.
Exactly.
Right, so they almost need support on both ends of the assignment.
They do.
It's like a cultural reentry program.
It is, yeah.
So what can companies do to help with that?
Well, offering repatriation training, kind of similar to that pre-departure training, but focused on reintegrating back into the home country.
Right.
And the company culture.
Yeah, okay.
Companies also need to, really recognize and utilize the valuable experience that those returning expats have gained.
Right.
Finding those suitable roles that leverage their global skills
Makes sense.
can make that transition a lot smoother.
Yeah, it sounds like managing expats is this delicate balancing act. From choosing the right people to begin with, providing really comprehensive training,
Yeah,
supporting them throughout the whole assignment,
absolutely.
and then ensuring that they have a smooth return.
It's the whole process.
It is. But even with the best preparation, how do you evaluate an employee's performance
Yeah.
when they're thousands of miles away working in a completely different context?
It's a great question.
It's not like you can just, drop by their desk for a quick chat.
Right, exactly. It highlights one of the more difficult aspects, I think, of IHRM,
Okay.
which is those performance appraisals for expats.
Yeah.
You have to consider those unique challenges
Yes.
and those cultural differences that they're facing.
I can imagine it's like a minefield of potential misunderstandings.
It can be.
And biases.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you ensure that you're getting like a fair and accurate assessment?
It's about involving multiple perspectives. So gathering feedback from both the home and host country supervisors.
Gotcha.
And considering like the qualitative aspects of their performance, not just the numbers.
Right. So things like, how well they adapted to the new culture.
Right.
How they handled any unexpected challenges.
Yes.
Things that might not show up in a spreadsheet.
Exactly, yeah.
So our source material, I know it also suggests involving a former expat.
Oh, interesting.
In that evaluation process.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Someone who's been there, done that.
Yeah.
They can offer such a nuanced perspective.
They can.
And really help to minimize bias.
Yeah, somebody who can bridge that cultural gap.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about compensation.
All right.
Do expats get paid in suitcases full of cash? Delivered by mysterious couriers?
I wish.
Just kidding. But seriously, how does compensation work for expats?
Right.
It can't be as simple as just, converting their home country salary into the local currency.
No, it's far more complex than that.
Okay.
Companies typically use what's called the balance sheet approach.
Okay.
And it's designed to make sure that the expat maintains their home country standard of living.
Okay.
While also receiving incentives for the challenges of that assignment.
Yeah, it sounds like another delicate balancing act.
It is.
Ensuring fairness for the employee, but also making that assignment attractive.
Right.
So what does a typical expat compensation package look like?
So it usually starts with a base salary.
Okay.
That's, comparable to what they'd be earning back home.
Right. Okay.
And then there are these premiums and allowances on top of that.
Premiums, like bonus points for bravery, basically.
Right. Okay.
So it's extra compensation for taking on that foreign assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually a percentage of their base salary.
Okay.
And then there are allowances to cover, specific costs of living abroad.
Like what kind of allowances are we talking about?
So things like hardship allowances.
If it's a location that has difficult living conditions.
Makes sense.
You've got housing allowances to help with rent or mortgage payments,
right.
Cost of living allowances to adjust for those price differences,
right.
Education allowances if they have kids who are attending international schools,
yeah,
and even tax assistance,
yeah, right,
to help them navigate those complexities.
Yeah, taxes are a whole other beast.
They are,
especially when you're dealing with multiple countries.
Absolutely.
Wow, so that's a lot to consider.
It is.
It's way more complex than I realized.
Yeah.
Okay, but all of this is assuming that everyone's getting along perfectly,
right? Which
we know isn't always the case.
No, not at all.
So let's stir the pot a little bit. Let's talk about labor relations.
Yeah.
How does that whole, management union dynamic play out on a global scale?
Yeah.
Because I imagine if you throw international borders into the mix and cultural differences,
right,
things can get pretty interesting.
They can, labor relations in a globalized world, it can be a bit of a minefield.
Okay.
Unions are naturally concerned about the impact
right.
that multinational companies are having on jobs and working conditions in their own countries.
Yeah. And from their perspective, it's all about protecting their members.
Right. Absolutely.
So what are some of their main concerns?
Well, they're worried about job displacement.
Okay.
Companies moving jobs to countries with lower labor costs.
Right. Right.
They fear the transfer of low-skilled tasks to other countries.
Okay.
Which leaves their members, with fewer opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also concerned about the imposition of unfamiliar labor practices that might not align with their country's norms.
Yeah. So it's this clash between, needing to stay competitive globally, but also protecting local jobs and standards.
Absolutely.
How does this tension play out in different countries?
Well, labor relations vary widely across different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So Germany, for example, they have really strong unions that play a major role in setting wages and working conditions.
Gotcha.
It's a very, very structured and collaborative approach.
Okay.
Then you have, Japan. Mm-hmm. They have a culture of cooperation between unions and management.
Interesting.
It's more harmonious, non-confrontational.
Okay.
And then you have places like Singapore with this tripartite system.
Oh, wow.
Where the government, the unions, and the employers, they all work together.
Okay.
To create fair employment practices.
It's so fascinating how those different cultural values, really shape these relationships.
They do.
Are there any examples of like more worker-centric models out there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Some European countries have this tradition of what they call industrial democracy.
Interesting.
Where employees actually have a legal right
Why?
to participate in management decisions.
That's huge.
It is, yeah. So many companies have these work councils.
Okay.
That are composed of, both worker and manager representatives who work together to try to, improve the company.
It's interesting to see all those different approaches.
It is.
To those worker management relationships, but it really makes you wonder, like, what's next?
Yeah.
For IHRM.
What does the future hold?
Right. Especially with, all the technological advancements, all the changes that are happening in the world of work right now.
Yeah, we can't ignore the impact of automation and these recent global events,
Yeah.
It's a whole new ballgame.
It is.
And companies are scrambling to adapt.
That sounds like the perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Let's do it.
We'll tackle those exciting and challenging trends next time.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we left off on a bit of a cliffhanger. The future of IHRM in a world that, feels like it's constantly changing.
It really does.
So first up, automation. It's a topic that sparks a lot of debate.
For sure.
Some people see it as, this huge threat to jobs.
Yeah.
Others see it as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Where do you stand on that?
Well, automation will definitely have a significant impact on jobs.
Right.
Our source material, it actually suggests that potentially 47% of jobs could be displaced over the next 15 to 20 years due to automation.
And that's not just unskilled labor, right?
No.
A lot of skilled roles are also susceptible as technology evolves.
Exactly.
47% though, that's a huge chunk of the workforce.
It is a significant number.
It makes you wonder, does this mean that IHRM is heading towards obsolescence?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think,
if machines are doing the work, what role is there for human resource management? Right.
Well, I think certain jobs will inevitably disappear, but new ones will also emerge.
Okay.
The key for IHRM, I think, is really adapting and upskilling that workforce to meet the demands of this new landscape.
So we need people with higher level skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just in the technical fields, but also critical thinking, problem solving, communication, things like that.
Yeah, those are the skills that are harder to automate.
Much harder. Right. So it's interesting. It's instead of being replaced, IHRM professionals might actually be more in demand as companies try to navigate this shift and retrain their workforce.
It's an interesting perspective.
It is. It's not just about managing people.
Yeah.
It's about preparing them for this future where, the rules of work are constantly changing.
Exactly.
Right. But let's not forget about the other major disruption of recent years, the pandemic.
Right.
How has that experience shaped the world of IHRM?
I think the 2020-2021 crisis really forced companies to completely rethink their approach to work.
I think so.
We saw this huge, massive shift towards remote work.
Definitely.
Which had a huge impact on, leadership styles.
Oh, yeah.
Health and safety protocols. Really, the entire nature of global work.
Yeah, that shift to remote work was so dramatic.
It was.
It seemed like it happened almost overnight.
It did for a lot of companies.
What new challenges did that create for IHRM?
Well, I think managing remote teams across different time zones and cultures brings a whole new set of hurdles.
Right.
It requires a new set of skills and strategies, especially when it comes to communication and collaboration.
Yeah. How do you maintain employee engagement?
Right.
That sense of team cohesion when everyone is, scattered around the globe.
It's a tough one.
It is. It's a question a lot of companies are still grappling with.
They are, for sure.
It puts a whole new spin on performance management, too.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate someone's work when you can't just, pop into their office?
Right.
How do you create that sense of community when physical proximity is no longer a given?
Those are all good questions.
Yeah.
And, the answers aren't always straightforward.
No.
I think the pandemic also forced a shift in leadership styles.
Oh, yeah.
Leaders had to learn to manage teams remotely, provide support during times of uncertainty, and prioritize employee well-being in a virtual environment.
It wasn't just about, getting the work done anymore. It was about leading with empathy and understanding.
Exactly.
So it's like the pandemic in many ways kind of accelerated these trends that were already underway.
I think so.
The shift to remote work, the focus on well-being, the need for adaptable leadership.
Yeah.
These were all things that were already happening, but the pandemic just pushed them front and center.
Right. It's like we got a glimpse into the future of work.
I like that, a glimpse into the future of work.
And to add another layer of complexity, Gartner, they actually identified 9 trends that are further shaping, the world of IHRM.
All right, hit me with those trends.
Let's delve into a few
that
might be particularly relevant to our listeners.
Okay, perfect.
Well, first off, the rise of remote work, it's here to stay.
It is, isn't it?
It is. So this means that companies need to revamp their policies around things like, digital collaboration, performance goals, employee evaluations.
How do you measure productivity in a remote setting?
Exactly.
How do you ensure fairness in those performance reviews when some employees are in the office and others are remote?
Those are the questions that, IHRM professionals are wrestling with now.
Right. It makes you wonder if the traditional office will even exist in the future.
I know.
And if so, what will its purpose be?
Big questions.
Huge questions. Okay, what's next?
So another major trend is this expanded use of data collection.
Okay.
Companies are using technology to track, all sorts of employee data.
Right.
From productivity levels to well-being indicators.
Yeah.
This data can be incredibly useful for understanding how employees are adapting to these new ways of working.
Okay.
Identifying potential issues and tailoring those support systems.
Data can be so powerful.
It can.
But I can also see how it could raise some concerns about employee privacy.
Absolutely.
Where do you draw the line between gathering useful information and respecting individual boundaries?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And finding that balance is really crucial.
It is.
Companies need to be transparent about what data they're collecting, how they're using it, and what steps they're taking to protect that privacy.
Okay, that makes sense.
So another trend we're seeing
is
this increasing reliance on contingent workers.
Okay.
Gig workers.
The gig economy has just exploded in recent years.
Yes.
What are the implications for IHRM?
Yeah.
When you have this workforce that's increasingly made up of freelancers and independent contractors.
It's a whole new set of challenges.
It is.
Companies have to figure out how to provide benefits, training to these contingent workers.
Even though they're not traditional employees.
Exactly.
Right.
They also need to think about career development.
Okay.
How to create a sense of belonging for workers who might not be physically present in the office.
It's almost like the definition of employee is being rewritten.
It is.
As work becomes more fluid and less tied to those traditional structures.
I think so.
What else is on Gartner's list?
So another interesting trend is this expanded role of the employer as a social safety net.
Oh, interesting.
So employees are looking to their employers for more than just a paycheck.
Right.
They're seeking support.
Okay.
In areas like, mental health, childcare, financial well-being.
So it's like the line between work and life is blurring.
Yeah.
And companies are being asked to play a more active role.
In supporting, their employees' overall well-being.
That's what you mean.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
And finally, there's a growing emphasis on resilience.
Okay.
Companies need to be agile and adaptable in the face of all this constant change.
Right. Whether it's a global pandemic, economic downturn.
Yeah, or disruptive technologies.
So IHRM is not just about managing people.
No.
It's about equipping them to navigate this world of uncertainty.
Exactly.
And rapid change.
It's about creating a work environment where people feel valued, supported, and empowered.
Right.
To learn and grow.
But with all these new challenges and trends, where does IHRM go from here?
That's the big question.
It is. What's the path forward? It feels like we've covered a whole semester's worth of IHRM.
Right.
In just a few minutes.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. From staffing strategies and expat challenges to the impact of automation, the pandemic. I mean, IHRM is clearly a field that's constantly evolving.
Definitely.
So for our listeners, as they're, trying to navigate this complex world of global workforce management, what are some key takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway is that IHRM is all about navigating complexity.
Okay.
It's really about understanding that human element in a globalized business environment.
Makes sense.
So we've talked about, cultural differences, global competition, rapid technological advancements. All of these things really require IHRM professionals to be agile, adaptable, and culturally aware.
It's almost like being a global citizen.
Yeah.
For businesses.
I like that.
You need to understand, different cultures, perspectives, ways of doing business.
Sure.
And you need to be able to anticipate and adapt to change constantly.
Absolutely.
It's a tall order.
It is.
But it also sounds incredibly rewarding.
Oh, it can be, definitely.
Helping companies build these strong global teams, supporting employees as they navigate those international assignments, fostering a culture of inclusivity and understanding.
All part of it.
These are all aspects of IHRM that can make a real difference.
Absolutely.
To people's lives.
They can.
That's what I love about this field.
Yeah.
It's not just about numbers and processes.
Right.
It's about people.
It's about people. Exactly.
It's about creating that work environment
where
everyone feels valued, supported, empowered to contribute their best.
Right.
No matter where they are in the world.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes IHRM so relevant today.
Yeah.
In a world that's increasingly interconnected.
So true.
Understanding how to manage people across borders. It's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what's next for our listeners? We've given them a taste of IHRM.
Right.
But I'm sure they're hungry for more.
I'm sure.
What advice would you give to someone who's, intrigued by this field and wants to learn more?
I would just encourage them to stay curious.
Okay.
Explore different cultures.
Yeah.
Read about global business trends. Connect with people who are working in those international roles.
That's great advice.
There's so many resources available, books, articles, online courses, even podcasts like this one.
Of course.
That can really provide some deeper insights.
Yeah. Consider this deep dive your springboard into this fascinating world of IHRM.
I love that.
So, what sparked your interest? What questions are you still thinking about?
Yeah.
Maybe you're curious about, the legal complexities of international employment law or the ethical considerations of globalization and its impact on workers around the world.
Yeah, the possibilities for exploration are really endless.
They are.
And who knows, maybe this deep dive has planted a seed. For a new career path.
Right.
Or inspired you to approach your current work with a more global mindset.
It's amazing what a little bit of knowledge can do. That's the beauty of learning.
Yeah.
It opens up these doors to new possibilities.
It does.
And expands our understanding of the world.
And in today's world, there's really no limit to what we can achieve. When we embrace that global perspective.
Absolutely. So whether you're, a seasoned global executive or just starting to dip your toes into those international waters, keep exploring, keep learning.
Keep pushing those boundaries.
And keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the world of IHRM.
I like that.
Because in a world that's constantly changing, the ability to manage and lead people across borders, that's a skill that will always be in demand. And on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into IHRM.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And remember, the world is your oyster. Go out there and make a pearl.
I love it.